What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. You know I'm sick, I know I'm sick, but football waits for no man. This is my prediction video for the AFC and NFC Championship games. We have two phenomenal football games going on Sunday. 3 of the 4 teams returning from last year's championship games, including a rematch for the AFC Championship. The AFC Championship Game sees the number 4 seeded AFC North champion Baltimore Ravens, currently sitting at 12-6, including their 2 playoff wins, heading to New England, Gillette Stadium, where the Patriots will host their 2nd consecutive AFC Championship game. The Patriots sitting at 13-4. Now, the line for this game currently sits at New England -9, favored by 9 points at home. Total points for the purposes of the over-under is a big number, sits at 51. New England at home this season, including their win last week over the Houston Texans, currently sit at 7-2, a very, very good record at home, outscoring their opponents 319 to 205. And if you do the math there, that's a clip of 35 to 23. That is a 12-point average spread at home. New England, a very, very good home team this year. Baltimore, of course, by way of winning that game last week, that thrilling game in Denver, is now 5-4 on the road this year. However, they are still being outscored by their road opponents, 182 to 200. So that's a clip of about 24-22 against. So, you know, it's still almost a field goal difference in average scoring against the Ravens on the road this year. Taking a look at recent head-to-head matchups, earlier this year, I believe it was in Week 3, September 23rd, Baltimore pulled out a thrilling 1-point victory over New England, 31-30. Also, at the tail end of last season, obviously, this was in the championship game there, January 22nd of last year, New England winning the game 23-20. And these two teams have split victories 2-2 in their last 4 meetings dating back to 2010. Common opponents. New England was an undefeated 4-0 in games against common opponents this year, holding wins over Denver, Indianapolis, and 2 wins over Houston. And in those 4 games, they outscored their opponents 173 to just 87. Baltimore in games against common opponents, they were 2-2, including their playoff win. They hold a win over Denver and a win over Indianapolis. They also have a loss to Denver and a loss to Houston. And in those games, Baltimore was outscored by their opponents 92 to 121. If you take a look at average season scoring, I mean, very few teams are going to be able to stack up to the Patriots in terms of average scoring on the season. Very few offenses and very few defenses will be able to hold them back. Overall on the season, it's around 29-24. We're looking at almost a full possessions difference between the two teams in favor of New England. Home versus away, New England's clip stays the same, around 29 points. Baltimore's offense tends to drop off a little bit when they play on the road, so the difference here is a full touchdown, 29-22 in favor of New England. Now, if you look at the last 5 in terms of momentum, it gets a little bit closer from home versus away, but New England still staying very, very consistent. The scoring there is 29-23, so it's an unconverted touchdowns difference, which again, in terms of average scoring, is a big advantage and a big tip into the corner of the New England Patriots. X factors for this game. The first one, New England stopped Arian Foster last week well enough, at least. He didn't top 100 yards. Overall, with all of his touches and everything he did, I think he even topped 150. But just strictly running the ball on the ground, he was not able to top 100 yards, so I consider that mission accomplished for the Patriots. Can they do the same thing to Ray Rice? Ray Rice last week had a very good game, sort of bouncing back from not a great game against Indianapolis, and when they played in Week 3, Ray Rice went for 101 yards on 20 carries and a touchdown. I hate to keep sort of harping on this same sort of point, but Baltimore is 4-1 when Ray Rice tops 100 yards. When he doesn't top 100 yards, they're just 8-5, so they're a much more beatable team when Ray Rice is not allowed to top 100 yards rushing. But if Ray Rice does top 100 yards rushing, Baltimore has a very, very, very good chance that they could steal this game. So New England has to be focused on who I would argue is probably Baltimore's most talented playmaker, and that's Ray Rice. Second X factor. And I hate to even mention this, because whenever somebody mentions this on a video, or certainly on, like, televised sports shows, it just gets me wondering, why the hell do you get paid to talk like this? People talk about the football gods, and I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic, but in any case, just like the whole concept of football gods just seems kind of ridiculous to me. I know it's part of the culture, but still. If the football gods exist, they might be Baltimore Ravens fans. Just, with Baltimore coming in as like sort of the wounded puppy of these playoffs. I even said it. I said whoever gets the Ravens in the first round is the team that has the best chance of beating a division winner and moving on. So I mean, even I'm saying it, and I'm a Ravens fan. Like, I mean, I really like the Ravens. And yet now they've come out and they've put on 2 back-to-back very, very good performances in the playoffs. And I mean, very few people were saying that Baltimore would outright beat Denver. I think most people were like, they might not cover this being Denver, but they're definitely going to win. So basically, if there are football gods, I think they might be playing favorites to Ray Lewis and the Ravens, but I'm still not convinced that they exist. Yet. The final X factor. Has this game become about defense? It seems silly to even think about this game in those terms. You look at Baltimore. Baltimore in these playoffs has at times looked like the defense of old. Like, the defense has looked like it's turning back the clock. And I know it's really hard to say that when they gave up 35 points in the last game. But you also got to remember who they gave up those points to. And ultimately that it was a play on defense, that interception, that ended up solidifying that win for them last week. And then you look at New England, and New England has at times been called like an all-time bad defense. But this season, New England's defense actually performed very well. New England only gave up 28 or more points 5 games this year. They've played 17. How do I think the game's going to go? Glad you asked. When you look at the total score there that we mentioned earlier, total is 51 for the purposes of over-under. I might be crazy. I can see this going over, and I say that even knowing that New England's defense has kind of overperformed this year, and Baltimore's defense has the potential to sort of play like they have before. Combined between these two teams, 18 of their 35 games, so more than half, slightly, but more than half, went over 51 points combined this season. Their last head-to-head matchup went over 51 earlier this season. And I look at this as two teams that this year have displayed their ability to score more than 50 points on their own. I take two good offenses, and you put them together, and 51 might seem like a big number. I'm going to take the over on it, and I'm going to suggest that you do the same. As far as the final score here, I really don't think the football gods, even the football gods, if they exist, have enough firepower to push the Ravens past the Broncos one week and the Patriots the next week. So in terms of a final score, straight up, I'm going New England 31, Baltimore 24, which is 55 total points, which is why you take the over 51. On the line, I like Baltimore plus 9. Even though I like New England straight up, I think plus 9 is too many points. Their last 3 head-to-head matchups have been decided by 7 points total. Baltimore's 2-0 against the spread this playoffs, and you know what? 9 points is just too many. So if you can get Baltimore plus 9, plus 8.5, even plus 8, I think that's the smart bet. AFC Championship Game, 2 versus 4. I'm taking New England straight up to go to the Super Bowl. On the line, I'm taking Baltimore plus 9. It's just too many points. Over-under, I'm taking over 51 points. The NFC Championship Game sees the San Francisco 49ers return for the second straight season, going into Atlanta to take on the top-rated Atlanta Falcons. San Francisco currently sits at 12-4-1 after their convincing win over Green Bay last week. Atlanta sits at 14-3 after their win last week. Now the line in this game, the last line that I saw, currently sits at Atlanta +4. And the total for the purposes of over-under sits at 49. Now much has been made this year about Atlanta playing at home, that they have a lot of prowess when they're playing in their building, and it's absolutely true. Atlanta 8-1 at home this year, outscoring opponents 226-164. That is a clip of 25-18. That's a full touchdowns difference. Very, very good numbers for Atlanta at home. You take a look at San Fran on the road. San Fran's offense on the road in their 8 games, on average, is very, very close. They're 5-3 in their 8 games on the road this year. Of course, last week they played their game at home, and have outscored their opponents 199-162. So that is a clip in those 8 games of 25-20 on the road. So it's a slightly smaller gap than has Atlanta. Head-to-head, these two teams have had no recent meetings. However, Atlanta has won 4 straight, dating all the way back to 2004. Common opponents. Atlanta was 5-1 in games against common opponents this year, holding wins over New Orleans, Arizona, the New York Giants, Denver, and Seattle. Their one loss coming also against New Orleans. They were outscored in those, they outscored their opponents, in those games 168-109. San Francisco was 5-2 in games against common opponents this year, holding wins over New Orleans, 2 over Arizona, Detroit, and Seattle. The 2 losses coming in another game to Seattle and to the New York Giants. And in those games, they outscored their opponents by a rather measly clip, actually, 138-130. So it was only about 8 points in those 7 games. Scoring on the season, it gets no closer than these two teams. Overall, San Fran 23, Atlanta 22. Home versus away, Atlanta 23, San Fran 22. Momentum, last 5 games, Atlanta 27, San Fran 26. It gets no closer than these two teams, and this is the best matchup, I feel, that the NFC could put forward for their championship game, is these two teams that are going to play each other so closely. X Factors. Colin Kaepernick had the game of his life last week. We talked about it. 444 total yards, was in on 4 total touchdowns. Can he come close to those numbers again? And everybody is really high on Colin Kaepernick. San Francisco is the really, really popular bet here. But I want you to just chill for a second and think about a couple of things. Last week was only the 2nd time in his career that Colin Kaepernick threw for more than 250 yards through the air. Now granted, it was his 2nd straight game of doing that. So maybe he's figured out how to consistently throw 250 in the NFL. But it was still only the 2nd time in his career that he had done it. And we're talking about a quarterback that now in 17 career games, so we're talking like a full season and a playoff game, in 17 career games, he only has 19 touchdowns. That includes the 4 that he had last week. So in the 16 games prior to that, he only had 15. We're talking slightly less than a touchdown a game. I think people are throwing a lot of expectations on this quarterback because he went hog wild last week, and he did. But rein it in a little bit and remember that really we're still dealing with a rookie. Yes, he played 2 games last season, but really we're dealing with a rookie who's still working on the whole being a starter in the NFL thing. And this is a league championship game. So temper expectations for Colin Kaepernick, but it'll be interesting to see, can Kaepernick get closer? Can he get relatively close to the numbers that he put up last week? Kaepernick, I know I swap around. I look at offense versus defense. Obviously, that's where football games are played. Offense versus defense, defense versus offense. The San Francisco offense has put up 40 points or more in 2 of their last 4 games. You turn around and you look Atlanta's defense has only allowed 20 points or more in 3 of their last 5. So there's 2 games in there where they didn't even allow 20 points. Atlanta's offense has put up 30 or more points in 3 of their last 4 games. San Francisco's defense has given up 30 or more points in 3 of their last 4 games. So the numbers there would tend to lean very slightly, but still lean a little bit towards the Atlanta Falcons. And that's where my third X factor comes into play. Atlanta's home prowess. You put Atlanta in their building, and it's just exactly like Seattle. They are a whole different beast when you put them in their building. And they proved that last week against Seattle because, again, like I said, that final score in that Seattle game is very flattering to the Seahawks because for 45 minutes, this was a 3-possession game. But we have to keep in mind, this is the same San Francisco team that went into New England a month ago, December the 16th, and beat New England in Gillette Stadium. So it's not like San Francisco can't win a game on the road, because they sure as hell can. I just don't know if after playing the game they played last week, if they can go in to Atlanta and finally, for the first time this year, win 3 straight games. How do I personally think the game is going to go down? Again, I'm very glad you asked. We look at the total there that I mentioned, 49 points. I can see this going over again, and maybe I'm just maybe I'm stilted because all 4 games went over last week. But honestly, I can see this game going over as well. I have reason to believe that 2 dynamic and clicking offenses can put up enough points to send this thing over 49. So I'm betting over on the 49-point total. In terms of a final score, I really like Colin Kaepernick, and I really like San Francisco. And I know how badly San Francisco wanted to be back in this spot again. And I know how good a team San Francisco is. But if they were going to play one team in the NFC in their building, in the NFC Championship Game, I think the last team that they would want to play at home in the NFC is the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta 27, San Francisco 24. 51 points goes over your total of 49. And on the line, obviously, I like Atlanta +4. Either way, even if Atlanta doesn't win the game straight up, I like Atlanta +4. I think it's the smart play in what's probably going to be a very tight game. And Atlanta is 11-6 this year versus the opening line. And the opening line in this was Atlanta +3.5. So we have, again, Atlanta straight up, Atlanta +4 on the line, over 49 points. Bridgewater's Finest says your Super Bowl matchup will be the New England Patriots for the 2nd year in a row representing the AFC. The Atlanta Falcons going back to the Super Bowl, and it's going to be a great game on February the 3rd. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Enjoy the games on Sunday. Pray to God I feel better by then.